My approach to work this semester. When I reapproached school, I was rather calm and collected. I felt the timing was right. However, I felt my skills were rusty and lacking. I approached my work responsibly and diligently throughout the semester and put in my best effort. Although my ideas swimming around in my head might have seemed well intended, the process of articulating them and laying them on paper was proven quite difficult. My spelling itself sometimes seemed under a spell, and my ideas often hovered around the mark before striking, only to miss. I relearned the missing pieces of grammar I had lost, semicolons, transitions, and paragraph structure in my knowledge base to try and help with those problems, while balancing the pressure and being tried and tried again in testing my ideas, evaluating their performance, considering deeper perspectives, deep meanings, and deep influence. I acted in perseverance with this course. How my ideas have evolved. When my work began in English 100, my ideas were needing major refinement, causing me to spend many hours working on my papers. Although the challenges were rigorous, I knew I would grow from them. I creeped and peeked around, leaving no stone unturned in my imagination to build my purpose in my writing. And I didn't stop there. Reading like a writer changed the way I see text, from a monotonous digital recording bound to English's stout and strict confines, to an artwork creatively spun from the webs of another's mind to inspire people to take action. Truly, practice makes perfect as I adopt the strategies that build effective sentences and confidently explain my topic. What I have learned about my own rhetorical situation. As we are constantly bombarded with flashy come get me's and buy me's, we interact with some and dismiss others. By looking closely, we can see the rhetoric behind these outside forces. Are they biased? Are they trying to get me to do something? Through this analysis, I've learned within myself to ask these same questions about my own writing and make thoughtful choices on how I can convey my ideas to get people to believe and follow them. What is it that I will be great at and be able to entice people to strive for and take part in? A place I've critically engaged in. Have smartphones destroyed a generation? Is a narrative written by Jean Twenge that explores the correlation between screen time and depression in teenagers. Twenge takes a formal and serious tone and a position on this issue of it being a countrywide, generational problem and one that she is guilty of as well. She writes this paper to target the audience of those interested in teen mental health and people at stake of its poignant forthcoming. She references historical instances of behavior in the previous few generations and compares them to this particular generation. Twenge finds that around the same time as the mass ownership of smartphones occurred, there was a noticeably sharp change in the feelings of loneliness and depression in teenagers. In the iGen, teenagers feel more loneliness due to their compulsory use of social media as they become more physically distant from their friends, family, and romantic relationships. Who do I see was my target audience? Reflecting on my past papers and who I believe was the audience in their instances, I am reminded of our first paper. I wrote a letter to Professor Jeff about me personally and my expectations. I tried to be casual and personable, but looking back now, that might not have been the way my message came across to him. I always knew Professor Jeff would grade my assignments, but I didn't seem to target him exclusively. My audience was an auspicious group, with little insight on the topic, however very open-minded. Were these individual ideas in my head asking me to nurture them to become the next great composition? I think yes. My audience in the rhetorical analysis of Twenge's excerpt had qualities of looking for strong depth in my meaning, but also really didn't have much background on the excerpt. This caused a reoccurring problem where my ideas were always battling the need to talk about content when Professor Jeff needed me to write about its rhetorical situation and analyze it. This often took my words astray, and if unsupervised, would morph into paragraphs of misses and irrelevancy, and probably send my audience off on some tangent as well. But finally, the revision. Did I hit the nail on the top of the head or what? Suddenly, my rhetorical baby was born, and like a flash of lightning, my rhetorical situation changed forever. Professor Jeff told me to refine my data, and it suddenly clicked. Professor Jeff was my audience, along with his experience, knowledge, and his questions. I produced a paper that was truly a blessing to read, and if stood side by side with the original, you'd think two separate people wrote two separate things. Important discussions when writing and revising. When we think of writing and its basis on symbols, we use those symbols to describe our perspectives on how we see the world and store those ideas for future use. In future use they shall incur, in the same way that we still use ancient texts today. Our writing, language, and experience in rhetoric we'll use later in business to act and solve problems in the real world. Questions to ask oneself when revising are, do people care about what I'm writing about right now? Is it relevant? Are my ideas fully explained? Are they relevant in that they answer the questions Professor Jeff has asked? When it comes to revising our ideas, the way that Professor Jeff had us peer review others' works by asking questions could be an effective way to peer review one's own work, yet not a perfect solution. Also, it's important when revising not to be afraid to make drastic changes in sentences, as well as changes when reevaluating one's ideas and considering their purpose. I would like to thank you for your time listening to my reflection on English 100.